Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our book talk for Newark Minutemen by Leslie K. Berry. My name is Wendy Vialta, and I'm the communications manager here at Holocaust Museum LA. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome, and thank you for being here. We are so excited to have Leslie K. Berry here with us today. Leslie is a best-selling author, screenwriter, and executive producer. In addition to Leslie's accomplished career in entertainment and tech, Leslie is a hobby genealogist and has uncovered many ideas for developing untold stories that help us appreciate the context of history, preserve lessons of the past, and honor memories. Today's event registrants will be entered in a raffle to win a signed copy of Newark Minutemen. So please stay to the end for that, and we'll announce the winners. There's going to be time at the conclusion of Leslie's presentation for question and answer, so please share any questions in the Q&A box. And it's now my pleasure to welcome Leslie.
Thank you very much, Wendy. And I'm so honored to be hosted today by Holocaust Museum LA. And I am very grateful for everybody who came to share the story. And hopefully what you'll hear today is part of a story that's adding to a lost part of American history that is directly tied to the rise of fascism in our country before World War II, and therefore to the overall Holocaust history, and also a story that gives you insights about what America knew about the Nazi threat before the war. As Wendy said, I've just published a book. It's called Newark Minutemen, and it's actually in development to be a movie as well. So Newark Minutemen is a historical romance, and it's based on my own family story, a true story that actually my mom helped me research. My mom is 95 now, so we started this about 5 years ago. And it is a mixture of action. So you have all this violence and unrest of this period that I will tell you about. But I didn't want it to just be empty sort of violence. And so it's combined and mixed with this drama of a romance layered over the story, and a romance and story that keeps you on edge the whole time. So this is a love story. It's a star-crossed love story that's doomed for failure, sort of the Romeo and Juliet or Jack and Rose of Titanic. And it's set in New Jersey in the 1930s. And it's set across a little-known historical backdrop of what was the rising German-American Nazi Party in America during the Great Depression, right here on American soil. So the story offers a dramatic perspective of actually one of the biggest untold stories leading up to World War II. And when writing this story, I discovered this portrait of America in the 1930s that revealed a lot of what America's responses were to fascism. So, setting Great Depression, 1930s, it was a very fertile ground for alternatives to democracy. You had this triple threat going on. You had this economic crisis from the crash of '29 that led to the Great Depression that lasted longer than we thought it was going to last. You had these aggressive dictators, and you had a pretty divided America. And an America that was hopeless, and they were looking for alternatives. And you know, when you lose hope, where do you look? You look left and right. And so the Americans, as Americans, we looked at communism, and was that right? And we looked at Franklin Roosevelt's solutions, which many called socialism. And then some looked to the far right, which was fascism, which was this thing across the ocean that, you know, in the early 30s, maybe it wasn't so bad. We didn't know yet, but some people thought maybe it was a solution. But what happened was that because of this divide, there was this shadow party that was actually a Hitler satellite, and it was called the German-American Bund. And the story of Newark Minutemen is the story about a forgotten resistance fighter group that was organized by the Jewish mob and our government to defend our country from this threat. So the story itself, it follows a Jewish boxer. His name is Yael, and he's part of this group, this resistance group of boxers, and they're called the Newark Minutemen, that was organized by the Jewish mafia and our government. And they were set up to go up against this German-American Bund. And in the story, Yael goes undercover for the resistance in New Jersey. And along the way, he falls in love with the daughter of the enemy. I'm going to play a quick trailer, 2-minute trailer, to give you a sense of the story. And then I'm going to take you through the story, the research, and sort of what it means to today. So I'm going to just play that now. Here we go. And all gets better. That was her staying there. It grew to the night where the flag was still there. Putting out a light, burning in their eyes, taking all its breath until there's nothing left inside. Spiders marching through, I hear they're coming soon, but I never have to fear, you're the angel in the room. Just don't close your eyes to the black and blue tonight. We're fighting for our love, but we're running for our lives. Just free your mind, at the end we'll see the light. We're fighting for our love, but we're running for our lives. With fire in our hearts, we bid farewell to once, but we are who we are. It's not written in the stars. Just don't close your eyes to the black and blue tonight. We're fighting for our love, but we're running for our lives. Just free your mind, at the end we'll see the light. We're fighting for our love, but we're running for our lives. 37, are we ever coming home? Straight from heaven, I will never let you go. 37, are we ever coming home? Straight from heaven, I will never let you go. Just don't close your eyes to the black and blue tonight. We're fighting for our love, but we're running for our lives. Just free your mind, at the end we'll see the light. We're fighting for our love, but we're running for our lives. Just want to make sure that's off. Okay. So that's a trailer of the story. And so as you can imagine, we've got this, as I said, star-crossed love affair over this background of threat to our country. So as you can imagine, you have this conflict of this relationship that layered over this world conflict. And the way I wrote the story was It's written through 4 narrators, and I wanted the reader to have empathy, because what you're looking at here is, there's kind of 2 bad sides, right? There's, well, the Nazis, and we know how that ends, but back then we didn't. And we have the mob, and both kinds are kind of, they're bad sides to both. So I wanted the reader to be able to understand and have empathy for both sides, and understand why people were following each side. So the four narrators are the heroine and hero, Yael and Krista. And then one of the narrators is this Führer, Fritz Kuhn, who's the head of the German-American Bund, and Longis Willman, who's the head of the mob in Newark, New Jersey. And so as you go through this, the reader will hopefully connect to the characters and understand what they were scared of, and what they were doing that was wicked, and what they were doing that was kind. And through these 4 eyes, I want the reader to be able to examine why America closed their eyes to this true satellite that Hitler was building in America for his Nazi empire. So in fact, this story has been buried for various reasons we can talk about. But if it had come true, we would be living a very different history. So where did this story come from? Well, 5 years ago, at my mom's 90th birthday, my sisters and I decided we were going to get 90 people there. So we rounded up all of her cousins and old friends and everybody. And so she grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and she was the daughter of immigrants from Pale of the Settlement in Russia. And she had 4 older brothers, and all the cousins and aunts and everybody lived on the street. And so all our lives, we grew up hearing all these stories about, so she was born in 1925. So we heard the stories about the Great Depression and World War II, and a cousin who escaped from Auschwitz. And I think there were 3 pandemics along the way. And then there was another story about my mom's older brother, our Uncle Harry, who was a boxer. And we had grown up with this story. We knew he was a prize-fighting boxer. We saw the trophy. There was a newspaper article. But that night, the cousins and my mom, they started talking about, they said, "Hey, Esther, remember when your brother would go out, he'd come home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and your mom would yell at him and say, why are you out there beating up the Nazis?" And I kind of did a double take, and I'm like, "What do you mean Nazis? You mean like when he went to the war in World War II?" And they're like, no, there were Nazis right here in Newark. And I was amazed. And my cousin and I kind of became possessed with understanding this story. And we started interviewing. I took my mom around. We interviewed her cousins and some of the other Newark Minutemen, or the sons and daughters, I should say, of them. And I discovered, I started digging and digging, and I discovered like thousands of pages of FBI documents that have relatively recently just been unsealed, I would say in the past 10 years, and archives and photos that were recently released, as well as some diaries that, which was an amazing find. There were 2 brothers who went undercover in 1936, and I found, and then they, one was a reporter, one worked for the FBI. They went undercover for 6 months, and then wrote a 14-day serial in the Chicago Daily News about their experience. And that was all very interesting, but what was super interesting was I found in the Hoover Institute, I found John Metcalf was one of the brothers. I found 12 boxes of his notes. And in fact, there's this one scene in the story where the hero, Yael, is initiated into what they called the OD, which was like the SS. It was the inner circle of this Führer, Fritz Kuhn. And I sort of take that initiation, and if you read the book, you can actually see the initiation rites, how that happened. But anyway, I'm going to show you another clip that when I saw this, it chilled me. And what this clip is takes place 1939 on Washington's birthday, 6 months before the war. And it's run by, it's led by this American Führer Fritz Kuhn that was running our country. He filled Madison Square Garden with 25,000 members, you'll see, and he called it Der Tag. It was the day where they were going to march, they were going to start a Nazi party in America. So that's just a couple minutes. I'm going to play just a couple minutes of that clip. And share that.
February 20th, 1939. Just months before Hitler invades Poland and ignites the deadliest war in history, thousands of Nazis gather for a rally at an indoor arena. But this isn't Nuremberg or Berlin. This is Madison Square Garden in New York City.
You all have heard of me, through the Jewish-controlled press.
And the man speaking isn't a member of Adolf Hitler's inner circle. He's Fritz Julius Kuhn, a U.S. citizen and head of the German-American Bund, or association.
Kuhn wanted a rally to celebrate George Washington's birthday. The first American fascist is what they called him. They signed a contract with Madison Square Garden. Said, okay, we agree. No swastikas, no anti-Semitic signs, none of that stuff. Of course, once the contracts were signed, those agreements went out the window.
This program was produced for the German-American Bund rally.
We love him for the enemies he has made. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Fritz Kuhn.
Kuhn then went on to deliver a very, very predictable and very, very typical National Socialist stump speech about racism and the Jewish conspiracy and the communists and how everybody's an enemy and everybody has to be alike.
We, the German-American Bund, organized as American citizens with American ideals and determined to protect ourselves, our homes, our wives and children against the slimy conspirators and the parasite pen of Jewish communism in our schools, our universities, our very homes.
Then, an unemployed plumber tries to silence the American Führer.
Oops, that's enough of that. Okay, so when I saw that, I was chilled, and at that point I was like, I have to understand this story and share it, and because I had never learned about it this period, and then to know that we had this resistance group fighting against it. So so just to give you, for those of you who don't know about the German-American Bund, you had this guy, Führer Fritz Kuhn is what they called him. He basically mapped out our country, divided it into three. From Germany, they called us the colony. And there were thousands of cells under each division with recruited soldiers who wore smuggled in Nazi uniforms. They actually got our guns from the NRA at the time, was giving away guns. They trained at our National Guard, and there was a whole group, internal group, that, as I mentioned, the hero plays this inner circle called the OD, which was like the SS that protected the Führer and did special things for him. And what this So Fritz Kuhn, he did two things really brilliantly. One thing he did was he turned this organization into a corporation with 6 companies under it. He had a newspaper, he had this group of recruits and so on. And he also had a real estate company in which he bought 25 pieces of property across the country, and he turned them into Nazi youth camps. And they became big moneymakers, and they also became big indoctrination places for kids. And in fact, the heroine in my story is modeled after one of the camp, the gals that went to camp in Long Island. It was in Yaphank, Long Island. It was called Camp Siegfried. And this camp was particularly chilling because later on in FBI reports, we found out that they were raping the girls there in order to increase the Aryan population in the country. So all this was going on. Why couldn't we stop it? Well, we were a divided country. Half or more than half of the people did not want to go be part of another war. That was sort of, we were seeing that that's what was going to happen in Europe. And but even bigger than that, we couldn't do anything because of First Amendment rights. And even though these guys were marching down our avenues, down Fifth Avenue with their arms in the air, dressed in Hitler uniforms, rallying, planning, spying, we couldn't do anything. So our government, okay, so who might be able to help us? Well, who had power in the country at the time? So remember, this is the 30s. The stock market crashed in 29. Everybody lost their money. Who had the money? The mafia. They had the money and the power. So the government went to the head of the Jewish mob at the time, Meyer Lansky, and he said, look, this is what's happening. We need your help. We'll pay you. And Meyer Lansky said, you don't need to pay me. You just look the other way. We'll take care of it. Well, Meyer Lansky went to his buddy in New Jersey, Longy Willman, who was head of the Newark area. And Longy ran all the gambling there, and under gambling came the boxers. And so Longy brought in one of his key vets, boxing vets. His name was Nat Arno. And he said, look, we're going to train these guys. We're going to train them to be ready on a minute's notice, Minutemen. And we're going to be able to call up 1 or 10 or 100, depending on the situation, to either stop demonstrations or spy on meetings or go undercover. And so that my Uncle Harry was a Newark Minuteman. And since I've gotten to meet many sons and daughters of Newark Minutemen actually as well. So this is a story of this unholy alliance between the FBI and between the mob and our government. It's a story about revenge, and it's a story about forbidden love between the Jewish boxer and the daughter of the German-American Bund. So what I've hoped that I've accomplished is that delivering and sharing a story about legacy, about passing down certain things, a story about immigrants and the melting pot that is America and the problems that we still have with that today, about the importance of fighting for freedom and standing up for our rights, and about an urgency to remember history because we know it does repeat itself. So that's the story of Newark Minutemen. And Wendy, I'd love to get anybody's reactions or responses or questions.
Great. That's such an amazing story to how you came about this journey. So it looks like we've got somebody asked if there's a problem with the audio. I just want to make sure everything sounds good on my end, but please let us know if there was any issues. This program is being recorded, so if you missed a part of it, we will be sure to send out that link after the event. But so let me pull up these questions right here. So who were these boys that were the Minutemen?
So they were Jewish boys, and if you know anything about that period, first of all, a Jewish teenager or 20-year-old or whatever didn't have a lot of opportunity during the Great Depression, or because they were Jewish. They couldn't get jobs. They typically couldn't get into good schools. And so their option was to work for the local community mob guy. And Longy's Woman was actually a very respected leader in the community. He helped the community. He helped people escape, families escape. He started soup kitchens, and he took care of their own. But where these boys also came from is they were kids of very tough men who had escaped very tough situations in Russia, usually at the time. That's probably mostly when their parents came here. And these were tough guys. And in fact, I think the stat is that in the 20s and 30s, there were more Jewish boxers than any other, Jewish champion boxers than any other ethnic group in the country. And it's because they came from tough guys, and that was the path, and they were paid well.
Amazing. Somebody wants to know, like, how much of the book is like rooted in like historical fact, like how much of it is made up, and what parts are like, fully like this happened exactly as it's written.
Great question. My whole goal was to make this authentic as possible, and I did so much research, and I think I spent every day for like 2 years talking to my mom, not only about those issues, but even like, how they took out the trash and what their showers were like and everything. So my whole goal all along was to make this authentic as possible. All the characters are based on true characters. The two that are a combination of characters are, so my Uncle Harry plays the sidekick of Yael, because I wanted a consistent character. So he's real. Yael is based on, actually, I mentioned the brothers from Chicago, John and James Metcalf. And because I knew so much about them through these diaries, I based Yael on their life, which was, again, I tried to make it as authentic as possible. I based the heroine on the girl who was in the Nazi camp. The love story is fictionalized, and just the history of that. Because I actually sold the screenplay first, and I was working to make it sort of, like I said, a Titanic type thing where you've got the love story over the historical backdrop. But certainly Longy's Woman, the narrator, he's true. I mean, we don't know a lot about the relationships between, because a lot of this isn't published, but I did a lot of research in terms of interviewing of personalities, and Fritz Kuhn is true, all the boxers are true, but as I said, the love story is the fictionalized part. And by the way, on my website, you can go, and I have a lot of background there if you're interested in that, those documents.
Great. And you guys will all receive a link to Leslie's website so you can explore that a little bit more. And somebody asked if you're familiar with Dr. Steve Ross's book, Hitler in Los Angeles, which I'm assuming you are. It's kind of interesting because we got two coasts here of, grassroots fighting Nazis, after World War II. So just interested to hear if you're familiar at all.
Yes, I am. And I actually, there's another one. Which one? What is that one called?
Hitler in Los Angeles.
Hitler in Los Angeles. And I think there's one called Hitler's in Hollywood or something. And I actually went and listened to that author. Those two authors, those two books were based on information found at Cal State Northridge. For that story, I believe was in more the early 30s, 34, 35 or something around that. And it's a really interesting story in that it was a plot to kill. It was the same vein of, they weren't called the German-American Bund yet. They were called the Friends of Germany, Friends of Germany. But it was the Friends of Germany. It was a plot to kill all the studio heads of Hollywood, like the Warner Brothers, Charlie Chaplin. I think even the president might have been in there as well. And what happened was there were some Jewish guys who said nobody would believe them. And so they kind of, I think they pretended to be part of the group, if I remember the story correctly, and they confused the group. So it became so confusing that it never happened. So, but that's what was happening on the West Coast, for sure. I mean, it was happening all over, but yeah, no, it was, I have to say one thing that was really interesting was you had these sort of splintered groups all over in the early 30s. Once Hitler took over in 33, there was a validation. And what really started bringing it all together was radio. And it's just kind of like, the internet. All of a sudden, you have a way to connect and communicate one message and connect multiple groups to have this, even though they might be a minority, to become a powerful minority.
Yeah. It's interesting, there's like areas in LA that people, it was like a Nazi stronghold somewhere in the Santa Monica Mountains, and it's just kind of fascinating. This is like the part of history that in LA that people don't really talk about. So, and the Newark story is completely new to me, so it's fascinating. Somebody asked, tell a little bit more about your uncle. Is there anything else you can share about his life as a Minuteman?
Sure. So let's see. He was, so there were, my mom was the youngest, there were 4 older brothers, and I believe that all of them worked for Longy in one way or another. Uncle Harry he was about 6'4", I think, and in his young 20s. And he won the 1936 Golden Glove Championship. And so, while many, many people were Newark Minutemen and helped with this, and in fact, if you're related to a boxer from Newark or New York, they were probably a Minuteman. But the first group, what they did was they took the prize fighting boxers. I don't know why they say that, but so he was part of some of the early groups that went out and was this resistance and got into these demonstrative fights and everything. After, let's see, so this was 38, 39. And then he was recruited for the Army. He became a policeman in the Army. And then after the Army, he was a policeman, I think, until he retired. And I knew him. I did, I think he lived until the 90s. Never really, always, he talked about his boxing, never talked really about the Newark Minuteman role, which if you talk to anybody who's related to the Newark Minutemen, that's part of the truth as well. It was talked about, it's interesting, since I've done this, I've gotten to know actually the other group is a lot of people that were related to the mafia at the time. And they knew a lot about what was going on, but nobody really talked about it because it was underground. It was a secret that it was going on.
Have you connected with many people who had relatives in the Minutemen, like through your research? How did they kind of help you develop the story a bit?
Yes. So the first group was, so my mom went to, it's called Weequahic High School, and it's the famous Jewish high school. If anybody saw Plot Against America, that's Weequahic is the town where Philip Roth's Plot Against America. And Weequahic alumni is a very strong alumni. And so my mom is on their website or whatever. And so we went on and we asked, does anybody have any anecdotes of the Newark Minutemen? And we got all these stories back that we incorporated. And then post story, I've had so many people reach out to me. My dad was a Minuteman. I've had two of my main 8 characters. I've become friends with 2 of the daughters of the Newark Minutemen. And on my website, again, I'm doing a gallery of all the Newark Minutemen. And so if anybody out there, if your fathers, uncles, grandfathers were Newark Minutemen, send me your pictures and I will put them up into the gallery.
Please let us know if anybody from this audience reaches out. That would be awesome. Yes. So, this story is, not a lot of people have heard it. Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think it's been buried for so long? Part of it, and you mentioned, it being underground, but, we hear a lot about the resistance during World War II and the Holocaust, but this is definitely something that is a little bit less known. So why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know 100%. My couple of theories are, one, maybe just World War II just upstaged all of this and was so horrible that, nobody remembered this part of America. I don't know, I totally don't buy into that. But secondly, as we just talked about, it was our government who approached the mafia. It was the mafia. So it was sort of an underground. And so it's not well documented. You can find, if you dig deep enough, you can find articles about, Nat Arno was arrested, the Minutemen, and this is what happened. So you can find them here and there. The other thing was Fritz Kuhn. What happened with him was the reason the German-American Bund pretty much ended in the clip that I showed you at Madison Square Garden. It was kind of a double-edged sword for him because he got so much attention that, and by the way, outside there were 200,000 people that had been sort of recruited and encouraged to go out to demonstrate against this movement that was happening in our icon of America. Madison Square Garden at the time was like, Apple Computer today or whatever. So he raised their awareness. And if you look at some of the newspaper articles from the next day, it was like an eye-opening. It was like, what is going on here? Why haven't we seen this? And so that curbed a lot of the activities, or people were more aware. They opened their eyes. Secondly, there was a movie that came out called Confessions of a Nazi Spy, which back then there weren't a lot of movies, and I think that came out in 1939. That opened up people's eyes. And then finally, Fritz Kuhn, the way that we got him, as I said, because of First Amendment rights, we couldn't stop a lot of the things that he was doing, but he was brought down just similarly to like how Al Capone was brought down through tax evasion, fraud. And so he was arrested about 6 months later. And by the way, there were a couple years there that Congress had set up different committees where they tried to bring him down. They tried to stop their activities, and they tried to stop the the hatred that was going on in an extreme way, and they couldn't do it. So they were able to find, the government was able to find enough information to 6 months later put him in jail. And that's kind of when the German-American Bund started crackling a little bit. There was another leader that came along, but really the charisma was gone of Fritz Kuhn, and he was a smart guy. Some people would call him they wouldn't give him much credit, but he was a smart guy. He was educated. He had a master's in chemistry. He was a smart finance guy. And once he was gone, they lost a lot of the organization. And then, obviously we started learning really what was going on in Europe.
Yeah. It's interesting that you could definitely draw parallels, right, to what we're seeing now. And, now it's kind of virtual, right? I know that I was on Twitter the other day, and there's like a Jewish, hacker group that is going after, anti-Semitic Twitter pages or websites and taking them down. So we're seeing a bit of repetition, right? So I guess, how do you feel that, this story is being brought to life right now in this moment in history?
Well, I think that certainly in the past year, we've felt a lot of the vibe or whatever that went on during that period. I mean, there is no, Hitler out there, but there are certainly groups that, I don't have to tell this group probably, that are, spreading hatred, anti-Semitic, organizing in a worldwide way, actually. We see it here in America, but there's some worldwide organization at the extreme going on. And I think what is similar the most, really similar, is the fear that the extreme right has. I think they have the same fear as they had in the 30s. And the fear is they call it, they call it the extinction of the white person, the white replacement theory. It's the same fear. And they think that not only their jobs are going to go, or whites' jobs are going to go, not only that, immigrants are going to come into America or to other countries, but that literally the white race is going to become extinct. And that's kind of a hard, I don't know, that's a tricky one to stop. But certainly some of the groups, I mean, we have a local group in our county that is focused on education, but sometimes it has to be a little tougher than that. So hopefully everybody keeps their eyes open and speaks out and recognizes what's going on, because it's not the same. Fascism isn't the same as it once was. It's wrapped up in something else. I mean, I actually, in some of my research, I actually went on to one of these extremist blogs, and it was amazing to me that there was an awareness of, we can't dress up with certain symbols on us. We have to wear a coat and tie and act smart about this. So we have to be careful in many ways.
And I think this answers somebody's question, where it's, do you feel there is a resurgence of the Nazi movement in the US today? And if you're aware of any organized resistance that maybe you came across in your research?
Well, I think there's a movement of, an extreme right. And by the way, I will say an extreme left too. And, the problem is when when you have those extremes, even if they're minorities, it's hard to keep the middle, and hard not to for a minority group to gain power and voice. And as I said, I recently watched a movie. I think it's called July 11th, 11 July or something, and it takes place in 2011, and it's about an extremist in Norway who bombs the capital and then goes and kills all the kids on this island. And it was really interesting to me because we're so focused on America, but one of the things that came out that I became super aware of is there's a worldwide movement going on, and different. It has it's different mixes of people, but I do think there's an extreme right around the world forming.
Yeah. Somebody said this is fascinating and so interesting, and thank you. And it really is. I guess, so you mentioned that the book is going to become a film, and that must be so exciting. You saw the screenplay first and then the book came. What is the most exciting about bringing the story to the big screen for you?
The most exciting thing is my mom going up to get the Oscar up on the stage. No, she's the one that keeps asking me when the movie's coming out. But the most exciting thing is, it's interesting. As we know, our older generation, our last Holocaust survivors are passing away, and we all want our generation and our younger generation to always understand what happened and how horrible it was, and that it should never happen again. And one of the groups that was interested in talking and having me talk was like, this is really great because this is a way to reach our younger audiences, our Americans. Like, first of all, this happened in America. This wasn't far away. And literally, I can't tell you how close we were to at least being, maybe not being taken over, but certainly being on the losing end or whatever. And because so the movie would have a lot of young people in it, and they're boxers. So, we could get a lot of good looking people. And I think it's a way to reach a broader audience, our younger audience, and to make it relevant because it's our country. So that's honestly why I'm really excited about it. And, with COVID, the brakes have been on and off and on and off, but there was an article in Variety magazine, if anybody's interested, that's on my website too. And that will tell you a little bit about where we are with it. We've gotten some great writers that will be the screenwriters. It's the producers are Full Will 73. That's the name of them. And they're 4 guys from the UK. Their 5th partner is James Corden from The Late Late Show. And they've partnered with some other big film companies with their company. So they're coming out with some films too. So, when we do it, it's going to be done like an epic, I think. It's not just going to be, an indie type low-end film. This is historical fiction. We're all in the camp of let's make this an epic historical story, make it broad, make it young, and an appeal for hopefully like a Titanic appeal, across the gamut.
Yeah. Well, if you need an actress.
Definitely. Anybody who comes to my listens here, just email me and you're first on the list.
Well, these boxers, I'm going to have to hear more about them. But somebody asked, what can we do as U.S. citizens to thwart a rise of anti-Semitic right and left? He is a commander of a Jewish war veterans post in California, and kind of like, you've seen just doing your research, what people were doing back then. Is any of that stuff that's like that they can replicate? I'm not advocating for anybody to go out and box, but, just some lessons that you might have taken away that people can, keep in mind as we're existing now and experiencing this for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a knee-jerk reaction, but I think it's really important is, education and making sure kids are educated in the right way. In California, there's been some trying to pass certain educational things, and it turns out that there's backlash. And so, education for our next generation. But also, it's interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine who may be on this. I'm not sure. His name is Sen, and he's from India. And I worked for him out of college. But he's always really good at giving me perspectives of the rest of the world. And one thing he told me about India was they're not educated in the Holocaust. Maybe they are now, but typically they don't know about the Holocaust. In certain continents in Africa, they don't know about the Holocaust. So maybe it's educating our kids down the road here, but also somehow getting more of a worldwide education. Those are all the nice ways and policies. Does there need to be a more rebellious way? I hope not, but there's a certain line. My uncle was one. I don't. There's a certain line. I don't think we should. Maybe we'll have to cross it someday. I hope not. But there's always hate. There's always hate, and you have to have ways to fight it back. So those are my two, nice education and education of the world.
Yeah, that's our whole mission, is educating people, because as you mentioned, we are approaching a world where soon there won't be any survivors. And, you see some alarming studies that younger American children don't know about the Holocaust. So, I know just on the museum side, we've been doing a lot more outreach into states that maybe don't have a Holocaust museum and trying to spread awareness, because that's what we believe, that education will provide people the tools to make better choices and understand these things. So that really spoke to me. Earl also asked, he said he has an uncle named Harry that also fought Golden Gloves in Chicago under a pseudonym. And do you know if there were any Chicago boxers that were Minutemen?
I'm sure there were. So I'll be very specific. So when there was a judge, it was a senator, I believe, then a judge, who went to Meyer Lansky, and he asked Meyer Lansky to create this resistance group. And Meyer Lansky created the Minutemen. So there are Minutemen in many different cities. The Newark Minutemen were the ones that were specifically trained in a more organized way to go out in those areas. But there were definitely groups in Chicago. So I'm sure he was at least a Minuteman. And I'll try to look it up, and maybe I should put a different section of different towns on my website as well.
Yeah, the story could go nationwide. Earl, you'll have to tell us if you find out that your uncle was a Minuteman. That would be fascinating. Well, we're getting up on the 5 o'clock hour. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we close out?
Probably the one thing I would say is talk to your parents and your grandparents, get their stories, or if you're, tell your kids to get the stories. I know there's a certain age you're not ready for certain stories, and I know we heard all these stories, and like any kids, we probably just ignored them. But, you know, try to share those multi-generational conversations and record them and write them down, and ask I mean, those 2 years with my mom were incredible. I mean, we're very close as it is, but spending every day understanding not just where did you go to school, but really, who were you? You know, who were you, and what were your fears, and why did you do certain things? And so that's my, I think, ending message.
That's a good message. Well, then we have 3 winners of a signed copy of your book. So those winners are Corinne Jaffe, Partho Sengupta, I'm so sorry if I butchered that, and Janine Hakim. So you will be receiving an email from us, and congratulations on winning a signed copy of Newark Minutemen. And thank you, Leslie, so much. This has been so fascinating, and we are so excited to hear what happens with the film. For the leading men, I'm very excited to hear who gets cast for those roles. And thank you so much for being here and sharing this incredible history with us. I know I speak for all of us when we say we're super excited to see what comes of the film. And if you haven't read New York Minutemen yet, and you were not one of our winners, you can purchase a signed copy exclusively at Chevalier Books. We put a link in the chat box, and those will be available. And if you're not a hardcover book person, Leslie's publisher is running a sale of the digital version of Newark Minutemen, and that's on Amazon, and it'll be $1.99 until March 10th. So we encourage you all to purchase it. Holocaust Museum LA brings programs like today's discussion at no charge. And if you're enjoying our programs, we ask that you consider supporting our work by making a donation to the museum at holocaustmuseumla.org or by becoming a member. More information about membership and a complete list of benefits is available at holocaustmuseumla.org/membership. This Monday, March 8th, we are excited to host author Leslie Gilbert Lurie, 2 Leslies this month, her mother and son, for the audiobook launch of her book, Bending Towards the Sun. This event will be moderated by former CNN White House correspondent Jessica Yellen. And then Thursday, March 11th, we have the pleasure of hosting Holocaust survivor Angelina Belauer, who will share her story of survival. You can find a list of our programs on our website always, and we hope to see you all again soon. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Leslie.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.